Okay, welcome. This is IT Security and Risk Management. I'm Emmett Gray. I'm going to be your professor. So this is an introduction to the course. It's sort of like a video version of the syllabus. So you do have to watch this because later on we're going to have a thing called a syllabus quiz. Yeah, that make sure you're actually watching the stuff. It's in this video. Okay, let's begin. So welcome. Look, I'm going to try to make this kind of interesting and fun. I'm not sure how successful I'm going to be, but I'm going to try. So this is kind of like an introductory level course that covers everything about security risk and planning. It's an awful lot of stuff about writing plans and having all this documentation. It's not a very deep course, but it does have lots of topics to discuss. And I typically don't ask you to memorize things. There's a couple of things maybe, but typically it's about concepts and philosophies. Okay, so about this class, this is obviously an online course with asynchronous video lectures. Some people have this bizarre idea about, oh, it's an online course, which means I could just do it whenever I want. No, there's going to be an awful lot of stuff that's due every single week. So the textbook, this is a 7th edition. It's actually a halfway decent book. I kind of enjoyed it. It's good. Prerequisites, basically just 12 hours of CIS courses, so basically nothing really. I will tell you that I supplemented an awful lot of the material in the book with my own experiences and things that I've learned, growing up in the security world. So you can't just read the book. You're going to have to also watch the videos and take notes. Okay. So online videos. So obviously these things are, broken up into weeks. Every Monday is when I release a new batch of them. There's typically about 2 chapters per week, so that's an awful lot of stuff. And the average video, I'm sorry, it's about 2 hours and 15 minutes long or something. I mean, that's a lot. And if you look at just the lecture portion of the videos, it's about 13 hours. And you're thinking, oh my God, 13 hours of videos. Oh, geez. Well, think about this. If this was a 16-week face-to-face course, for 16 weeks, I'd see you twice a week. For an hour and 15 minutes, that turns out to be 40 hours. So you're making out like a bandit getting, 13 and a quarter hours rather than 40. So the videos are broken up into 15-minute chunks because I know you have a life. You can't sit still for, hours on end. So break them up into logical chunks, around the 15-minute mark, so to speak. So you can run off to the bathroom or go attend to business or crying kids or answering phones or whatever, because you have a life and I'm not trying to intrude. Later on, I'm going to show you a thing on YouTube where you can speed up a video. There's a little gear that pops up in the corner and you can change it to 1.5 or something. Now, I would typically recommend that you watch the video at normal speed, but perhaps you're doing like a review or something, well, speed it up to 1.5, maybe even 2, just to kind of get through it in a hurry. Okay. So asynchronous content, which means all this is recorded in advance. I mean, you can't raise your hand and ask a question, right? But you can send me a Canvas email saying, I had trouble with this. Could you go over it again? That's perfectly okay. Don't wait. Don't wait until you're doing the quiz and go, I didn't really understand that. You can even, if you're in the middle of working on an assignment, you can even send me stuff saying, look, this is what I got so far. Am I even on the right track? And I might give you some pointers and say, yeah, you're doing pretty good. Just remember to do this, 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 and this, that kind of stuff. So it's perfectly okay to ask me questions, during an assignment. And if you need a real honest-to-God face-to-face, that's okay. We'll do either a virtual face-to-face or even schedule a time I could meet you out at the university. That's a possibility. Okay, so this is a summer semester, which means you're really going to have to be in your A game here. You're getting 16 weeks of stuff crammed into 8 weeks. This course is absolutely identical to a 16-week face-to-face course. The exact same words being said, the exact same graphics being shown, the exact same quizzes, the exact same assignments. It's all just crammed into 8 weeks. So you really got to be paying attention. You cannot fall behind. This requires an awful lot of self-discipline because if you fall behind in an 8-week course, oh man, you're in bad shape. Okay, so more about this class. This is what's called a lecture-heavy course, which basically means the quiz questions and assignments come from what is said and done in lecture, not necessarily from the book. Okay? There are very few PowerPoint slides. I have a couple just to show you a couple of things. but I use my lecture notes, okay? All right, so this is what's called an active course. It's not a passive course where you sit back and just absorb the information and regurgitate it when it comes time for a test. No, this is about learning about some stuff and then applying what you learn, not asking you to memorize things. I hate memorization. Okay, so learning objectives. Describe the common body of knowledge of information technology security. This is a kind of a beginning course. Computer security technology and methods. Analyzing vulnerabilities and implementing countermeasures, basically writing plans, discussing the legal, ethical, and professional aspects, etc., etc., etc. So this is a pretty decent beginning course. So the requirements. So obviously everything is done in Canvas, right? Quizzes, assignments, everything. So you have to have a decent computer. I'm going to be using a Windows-based computer, but you don't necessarily need that. The university does have computers in the library that you can use. And you need a reliable internet connection. I mean, it'd be really bad if you're in the middle of a quiz and the internet went out. That would be really bad. So having a decent machine and a decent internet connection would be really handy. So what are your expectations? Well, you're going to learn an awful lot about, top things in security. The things that keep security people awake at night. Okay? You're going to learn off about the administrative tasks associated with, the plans, the training, and you're going to demonstrate your knowledge of all this security. You don't really have to be a security expert to do well in this course, and it's not really my job to kind of convert you, so to speak. So this is kind of a beginning level, and it's mostly about understanding and doing plans. So what we're going to cover, we're going to cover all 12 chapters in the book, plus lots of sections that are not in the book. I supplement this with about 2 weeks worth of extra content. Okay, so I show this at the beginning of every course. Basically, this is the Bloom's taxonomy of learning. And the point of showing this is that you understand where I'm coming from. In grade school, it was all about define, duplicate, list, memorize. That's, memorizing the state capitals, that kind of stuff. Man, we don't have anything like that. We have in the green, I want you to implement, solve, use, demonstrate, interpret, operate. Basically, I want you to do something, not just regurgitate, do something. So this is a real honest to God higher level of learning kind of a concept. I want you to differentiate, organize, relate, compare, contrast, distinguish, examine, right? Okay. So just to drive this point home, one of the things I talk about is what versus why. What's the state capital of South Dakota? And the answer is, I don't know. I don't care. I got a phone. I don't need to know that stuff. I don't want to memorize things, okay? So those things are just like I forgot or artificial intelligence or online resources. Those are things that help on the what. But quite frankly, those tools aren't really going to work well when it comes to why. Like, there's two choices on how to do this. Why this one versus that one? And some of them have nothing to do with technology. It's more of a psychological thing. Like, why does this organization here on the org chart rather than over here in the org chart? And trust me, it has nothing to do with technology. Okay? All right. And so what are the long-term effects of my choices? These are things you can't get with Google or get from AI. All right. Got it? Good. All right. Course requirements. There's 2 major exams, a midterm and a final. The midterm's not comprehensive, so, it's the first half and the second half. Review session before the quiz. Basically, I'm going to go through a list of all the things that might appear in the midterm and the final. Okay. There's 6 quizzes. Basically, they appear, a week in advance. 6 assignments that appear 2 weeks in advance. And then 1 term project where you're going to turn in this relatively large Word document. And you get 3 weeks notice. There's a participation score. Participation is based upon a thing called a syllabus quiz I mentioned briefly. Journals, which we haven't talked about at all yet. And then, whether or not you've been keeping up with your assignments. Okay, so here's how the percent of grades are. There's 2 exams, so 10% each. 6 quizzes, 5% each. 6 assignments, 5% each. The term project is a whopping 15%. Yeah, that's a lot. That's a 1.5 letter grade. man, you can't mess that guy up. It's going to either make or break your score. And then participation is kind of a measly 5%. I'm just trying to make sure you're there at the other end of the video. So grading policies, I use the tens, just, 90 is this and 80 is that. I mean, I don't care if it's 89.99999. I don't round off. It's just exactly the way it is here. Okay. All right. So here's the weekly schedule. So the takeaway behind, I'm not expecting you to actually read all this. Takeaway behind this is there's typically 2 chapters we talk about, and then a ton of stuff. Almost every week, there's a quiz, assignment, and a journal. We'll talk about journals in just a minute. So every week, there's almost always 3 things that are due. Okay. Workload. So I mentioned this, 2 or maybe 3 hours of videos every week. So I'm expecting you're going to be spending about 1.5 outside of watching the videos. Okay? This is fast-paced, 2 hours, and I would never, ever say, oh, well, I'm just going to breeze through the week because I have a tough job, and I'll just do everything on Sunday. Wow. That is not a good plan. I am sorry. That is just not a good plan. You can't watch all the videos and do all the assignments in one day, one afternoon. Oh, that's a bad idea. You really need to be spreading this stuff out. So a quiz, assignment, and journal due every single week, typically on a Sunday, but the last week of the semester ends on a Friday. All right. So weekly routine. Sunday, everything is due. Assignment, quiz, and a journal is due. And then the Monday morning is when I release the new batch of videos and the new batch of things called lecture notes, which I'll talk about again in just a minute. All right, so here's just some talk about the exams and the quizzes. So the midterm and the final, obviously conducted at home. This is an online course. So open book, open notes. You might think, woohoo, great, open notes, open book, open internet, open everything. I'll do great. That would work if you had simple questions like, what's the definition of this term? That's not the kind of questions I ask. I ask questions that take a little bit more thinking. There is a separate review session, so I'm going to go over all this stuff. The take-home quizzes, obviously, they're done at home. And then the lecture notes. Now, I have a thing called lecture notes, which is designed to keep me on track when I'm doing my lecture videos. It's basically like a script that I follow. I tie it to a graphic on the screen. I'll mention page numbers, and so you can kind of keep up in the book. But when it comes time to creating the quizzes, I don't use the quiz bank from the publisher, okay? I write my own quizzes. And when I write my quizzes, I don't look at the book at all. I look only at my lecture notes. I'll bring up my lecture notes and go, wow, hey, this make a good question. Oh, here's another one. This would be an excellent question to ask. So if I'm looking at those lecture notes to build these quizzes, you think maybe it'd be a good idea for you to be looking at those very same lecture notes during the quiz or before the quiz? Yeah, that'd be a really good idea. Just saying. Okay, assignments. One of the most critical things in an assignment is understanding what I'm asking you to do, and hopefully I've made that clear. I'm not perfect. I could be confusing, but reading comprehension is key. I mean, I've had scenarios where I'd say, okay, do the following 4 things. And the student will turn in, okay, here's the 3 things you asked for. And I'm going, what? Go back and read the assignment. Typically, you're going to be turning in a Word document in Canvas. And I have a standard file naming convention. So this may be a little crazy. And you might think, that's a heck of a lot of work for no particular reason. But trust me, there's a reason. It goes like this. CIS4341, space. Whatever it is you're turning in, assignment 1 or assignment 2, space. Your last name, dot, and your first name. Now look. This is a very simple test to see if you can read and follow instructions. This is not like the last time you're going to see this. Every single assignment at the bottom is going to show you exactly what I'm expecting you to turn in, the file name. So, a very early test. Reading and following instructions is a critical skill for any job you might have, okay? So, I'm expecting you to do this. Obviously, we're only submitting it in Canvas, not doing anything on paper. And I typically will allow you to resubmit a document multiple times. Now, not quizzes, but assignments, you can resubmit them as many times as you like. Okay, we're coming up on the 15-minute mark. We're going to pause this video, and then we'll pick it up again in part 2.